Biology chapter 18 theory video 9 genetic diversity. Now we discussed about species diversity. Now in species diversity we discussed about different species. In genetic diversity we are talking about the diversity of alleles within the genes in the genome of a single species. That is, there is a single species, then a single species would have the same genes, but their alleles are going to be different. So that is the reason why, now for example, if you take human beings, not all the human beings look alike, even though they are in the same species. For example, Chinese people would be different from all of us. The white people are different. So there are some different alleles that brings about those changes. So that is as a result of the genetic diversity. Then now if you take dogs are of different, the different breeds of dogs, they are not of a different species, they are the same species, but they have genetic diversity. As a result, they look alike. In natural order also, now these are domesticated animals, and in natural order, like in human beings also, and then in other plants and animals, we can see that these kind of different alleles coming into play and bringing about different characteristics from one another, uh, but they are not as obvious as domesticated animals or the plants that we have bred for cultivation purposes. Now, these different adaptations could be a result of abiotic features. For example, uh, for example, the competition for food or survival from the predators, and also it is a part of the biotic feature, that is the genetic diversity, right? So different adaptations that we have developed as a result of the genetic adaptations that we have developed as a result of abiotic features, as well as the natural gene allele exhibition of different alleles will bring about this genetic diversity. Write down a note. Genetic diversity is the diversity of all alleles within the genes in the genome of a single species. When we consider, leave a line and write, when we consider a single species, their genes would be all the same, but their alleles are going to be different. For example, domesticated dogs types of garden rose, etc. The genetic differences exist within a species because they are adapted to different conditions differently in their range. So it provides the opportunity for population to adapt to changes in biotic and abiotic factors such as competition, evading new predators, resisting new strains of disease, changes in temperature, salinity, humidity, and rainfall. I hope you understood. If you understand, please do question number 7. Now we are going to assess species diversity. Now, so now in a practical sense, how are you going to how are you going to assess the presence of different species and how their interactions with one another? Now, when you go to a let's say a pond ecosystem, then you have to consider all the animals, plants, and microbes, and all of these you have to consider when taking samples, when collecting organisms. Now, when you go to a forest, then obviously there would be larger animals and bird species and other animals, and also large plants. But this is not going to be the only part of that species, because there are invisible forms as well. Then to identify these organisms, biologists use different mechanisms. They take photographs, they do drawings. Now it is really easy for us to take photographs and identify species. Then we have a dichotomous key to identify what group it belongs to. So you have learned this, you know about dichotomous key, and this dichotomous key will be will help us to identify to which family, genus, or species it belongs to. So then you might want to take samples out of these species, and then you have to identify them. Now it's a practical thing that you can do in your garden as well. You take different species and try to understand them by identifying their unique features. Now the animals would be difficult to find and collect. Now, for example, now when you take a sample, these animals need to be collected and can be kept in a certain place. Now there is a apparatus called a pooter, which is actually kind of a suction tube that can be that you can use to get animals into small plastic containers to be identified at a convenient place. However, these animals are not killed, and they are reintroduced back into their habitat. Now, when you take a large area, it is not easy for us to identify all of the animals because because of practical reasons. Now, for example, there would be, now in an earlier situation we discussed that there could be more than 1,200 species of one type of insect in a tree, because we are living in a temperate rainforest areas. There are many plants, many insects, many animals, and because the biodiversity is high, so we can simply divide them into some groups. Now, for example, flowering plants and insects, if you divide them, so it is obvious differences. So we can identify these different obvious organisms and use them to we can use their features to identify them separately. Now we have two questions that should be answered. How are the different species spread throughout the ecosystem, and how many individuals of each species are there? So the answers for these two questions would give us the answers would describe the two definitions: distribution and abundance. Distribution is how are the different species spread throughout the ecosystem, and the abundance is how many individuals of each species are there. So those are the answers for distribution and abundance. I hope you understood. If you didn't, please tell me. Write down a small note on this. Assessing species diversity, collecting organisms and making species lists. When an ecosystem is considered, we can identify and catalog the types of organisms present in the ecosystem and build a species list. By using photographs, drawings, dichotomous keys, we identify these species and categorize them accordingly. Leave a line and write. How are the different species spread throughout the ecosystem? Put a dash and write. Distribution. Next one, how many individuals of each species are there? Put a dash and write. Abundance. I hope you understood. Please do question number 8.